that I would not speak Spanish to my mother. She spoke beautiful Spanish, and she would speak to me, and I would just glare at her. Glare at her and then because if you'll notice, I don't have a Spanish accent.
I had no idea.
But that was part of the trauma. That was just part of the problem. You know, wanting to fit in. That idea of wanting to be a part of the whole. And so both of you went to UT, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it had. Do you feel like it has? Do you go back to campus now?
I used to go back after I graduated because I was doing a year and a half of ER work in the labs, enhanced oil recovery. But since then, I think I've only been back like a few times tops, just to take some walks, you know, reminisce some memories, or maybe show a girlfriend around.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, look at her! Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Welcome to a reasonably spontaneous conversation, part 1, because I'm going to get a chance to have 2 conversations, and that you're welcome to join in on. And this is Tarek Zaher.
That's good.
Say it again.
Tarek Zaher. That's
Tarek Zaher. And Brien Foster Allen, my 2 friends. And we're talking about the one of the things that I want to talk about is that being men in the 21st century. For 10,000 years, we have had private property when we came up with that concept. And then suddenly the divine feminine was subsumed and the masculine took the lead. You know, strive, drive, go out there, conquer lands, make, control, all the. All right, well, it's gotten us this far, but now suddenly we're having to share power. We're getting a chance to go through a process of having to bring into not just equality in this in order to be able to go forward. So I want to talk about that process of how we're doing it. I mean, I've seen it in my life. In my life, it was very homogenous. Not just homogenized like white. It was white male and all that. And now we're seeing it.
And like your life in terms of like the workplace?
Workplace, home life. The women, the mother was, women's roles were nurse, teacher, homemaker. This was the, and now we're opening up like in your classes, in petroleum engineering. Aren't there a lot of women in petroleum engineering that are starting to?
There were a fair amount of women. I would say it was still predominantly male dominated, but there were a fair amount of women.
Yeah, as we're starting to see, and in your classes, there are a number.
The STEM usually it's still not. There's less women than men, but the liberal arts there's actually more women than men.
Absolutely,
they're just better at that sort of thing on average than.
Now, before we were talking about the different, religion and spirituality and where we're going in our concept of God and how that's because I think that's an important. It certainly has been an important process for me. Has your concept of God and what God is evolved over the course of these last few years?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm interested to hear. Well, my concept has evolved in that it evolved to not existing, so that's an evolution of a sort, but I'm interested to...
That is,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, mine has been on a radical journey. Like I said, after being held hostage, I went from being an atheist to a theist, and at this point, I feel like I have a really, it's really hard to explain what God is for me, but it's kind of like I've abandoned the anthropomorphized version of a deity, but in doing so, it's allowed me to see the true intricacy and fractal nature of what God really is to me.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you that time we were at Panera, I think it was, it's like all self really is like dashed like circles on a napkin. And when you erase the circles, death, or when you write the circles, birth, the napkin will remain always. And the napkin is God.
Interesting.
I love that because it's outside of the realm and outside it's bigger than what, as we talked about, Richard Feynman talked about how God is, the concept of God is larger than the stage. It's bigger than I could possibly imagine, whatever that word is. And when you sit there and so what has been your evolution, Tarek?
Well, it's hard to believe in God when you don't have a set. I think we usually believe what our parents believe, and
Right.
when our belief in God is determined usually geographically. So if I was born in Saudi Arabia, I would be a devout Muslim, and so I lived in Texas as my family Muslim, so I never had that geographical like foundation that most people have that sort of compels them throughout their life to believe in God. And so I always wondered what people meant. Right? It doesn't even seem to make sense to me what people mean by God a lot of the time. And as I researched, and something,
Sure.
I remember I was 13, I cite, does God exist in Google, things like that. You see that it seems more and more like it's a coping mechanism or a vehicle to spirituality, to put it less derogatorily, for life's problems. And people, I'm hesitant to often argue with people and try to convince them of what I think, because I don't want to destroy that for them if that adds value to their life. But to me, trying to uncover the truth of the universe and finding meaning based on what I know to be true rather than just what I think I can invent to cope with is more meaningful. And people I think are worried about what the result will be if you let go of the fictitious things and just go for the truth, and well, maybe we're not significant and we're not meaningful. And I found that it's actually the opposite. There's an interim of scariness, but it's not. People want the universe to bestow meaning onto their lives, as in a God made you for it, and you're the most important thing in the universe. And I found that I think it's the opposite, that it's we who bestow meaning onto the universe, and that is more magical and makes us more significant. And it's even better based on verifiable evidence. And that's so if you want to call that God, right? That ability to create meaning is God-like to me, and I think that's touching divinity.
That's beautiful. That's
That is
so
beautiful.
well said. That
great
really
way to put it.
resonates a lot with me. Talk about your experience, Brian.
I really like what you said about coping. To me, that falls right in line with Maslow's hierarchy. That's a really, really, really good way to put it. And I love like the concept of meaning and the magic of meaning. And I thought for a long time, like, how can I reconcile science and like this narrative I'm experiencing, this conscious narrative? And I just in my own ponderings, I almost saw the link within chemistry and thermodynamics. That entropy is the impetus behind meaning and consciousness. And essentially what it does is it drives us to a sense of purpose, like our narratives, the things we create, the things we tell ourselves, like our sense of self and our sense of identity gives us a purpose. So it's like, okay, well, I want to do music, or I want to drive to the store and get these things. Well, now I'm going to operate a vehicle which involves combustion reactions, inefficient combustion reactions that are breaking chemical bonds inefficiently, that are always increasing entropy in an irreversible way.
Right.
Or like when we're in World War II, fighting the Nazis, okay, well, we got to stop these horrific things. Well, now we're going to split atoms to do so. I can't think of anything that's releasing more entropy into the environment than that.
Go ahead.
So I see a link between meaning and
Are you saying
chemistry.
that it's analogous, the combustion in the car and our thoughts and beliefs of acting change, or are you saying that our consciousness and our desire to do certain things, like drive to the store, is the universe enacting entropy? Because if we do that, then the car will combust and do such things.
Yes, I would say it's more like it kind of goes along with psychology too, and the components of the brain, the limbic system. Versus the neocortex. The neocortex is conscious, rational thought.
Right.
And then the limbic system and the things below it, like the brainstem, that's all your animal brain, from the very, very unconscious parts of you to the subconscious and things like that. And the neocortex is constantly trying to regulate the animal side. And so really, that's why we have a lot of unconscious biases and stuff, is, and we have these narratives is because it's all about like the things we tell ourselves. And We have like masked intentions and motivations for a lot of things.
And now the neocortex this is in front, right? The anterior cingulate, is that where that is? This is the
I'm
front
pretty
part,
sure,
right?
yeah.
I believe so.
And this is the later developing,
Yes.
as opposed to the earlier. So,
Yes.
so this is really fresh. This is new stuff.
Right.
This is stuff we're exploring. We're getting a chance to play here, and to learn and to be part of how we can use this. And maybe, because I was thinking about this from a mathematical point of view, all right? Because when Einstein started using the kinds of geometry and in order to be able to, tensors and all the things that he did in order to be able to create the theory of relativity and special relativity. He wasn't a great mathematician, but he had friends. who were.
Yes.
and so you ended up getting this math. Well, now what if there were a level of mathematics that in a variable had a subjective variable, not just an objective variable? There isn't just but a subjective variable that merely viewing something changes it. So that's the subjective. I mean, we know that at the quantum level, right? I mean, how the hell does that happen? What does it happen? I mean, it collapses either a particle or a wave depending upon how I look at it. What the hell is that? How does it know? There's that's where I'm thinking that observational aspect of it that changes, and this is where I think we're learning this, and that's where consciousness is coming together.
The universe is observing itself. We're just a part of it, and that self-interference of the universe is what's happening.
A self-excited circuit. Anyway, yes, exactly. The universe observing itself, and that's what there's something about this, because when we talk about God, because I love using that term, because it's like how can we say I don't, your concept of God or whatever that would be when it's such a complex word. Are we even talking about the same thing when we use that same word? I don't believe in. What is it you don't believe in? It's much more complex than just saying, okay, well, there is a certain story, a particular story about God that this person uses. Okay, I can say I do not, that story is not a story that will help me and help me go through the day. But that helps that person. So how is that not just as valid to that person in the way they're doing it as my story is to me?
I would agree, but there's some issue, right? For instance, if my story involves that you have to give me everything you own and be my slave, right? That works for me.
Well, that is my story, and thank you, and so I'd like you to. And so you're absolutely right.
And I think often, so a lot of the moral frameworks are built on stories of how the world was in the past and how we are in the present, our nature. Christianity, for instance, says these stories happen and we are inherently sinful from original sin, and we have to repent and try to absolve ourselves from that by doing, and then there's room for wiggle room, wherever you want to do. But some people that might disagree with that story, that is helpful. And some people might say that it is helpful for them when really it isn't. And I think certain aspects of focusing and wallowing in your own self-hatred can be extremely harmful
it has been so harmful to me. I mean, there is no question. That's a wallow place that does no good for me. It does not help. It is never. I mean, when you went through the trauma, when you had the physical trauma and you were held hostage during the time that when you're doing, did that help? Did coming to be able to heal from that and to be able to be in, to be able to have compassion, both for yourself and for the entire situation. Can you talk about that as a journey, Brien?
It's been an insane journey. A lot of things happened in my life. It wasn't just that. Like, my dad was an alcoholic and drank himself to death. A lot of other things happened too. Being betrayed left and right by a lot of people that I was very vulnerable to. And so as a consequence, I developed a psychological condition, a personality disorder, borderline personality. Maybe you know about it,
Yeah.
maybe not, but
Share with us what you're willing.
oh, absolutely. Basically, what happens is it all comes down to the regulation between the cortex and the lower parts of the brain, the limbic system and the brainstem. What happens is if certain triggers are put in my space, my brainstem will go into automatic survival mode, but my conscious self will take a back seat. And so it's all a defense mechanism. And so in certain situations, I cannot control it because my body wants to survive above all else. And so what happens is, but Brian's still there watching in horror as I'm defending myself. And I'm like, no, don't say this. Like, that's rude. And then I'm just like, and then the body just does it. And I'm like,
Sure.
So there's a conflict going on inside of my brain, inside of my body, and it's almost like having split personalities in certain moments.
Well, and I relate to that so much because I see myself. I have a thing with because I'm an actor, and I have a thing with Melissa, my wife, and I will find myself reacting to something, and then and I'll have a part of me that will go, Dennis, you're acting like an absolute ass. I can't believe, there'll be, and then finally that voice will get through to me, and I'll say, okay, wait a minute. Can I have another take at that? Can we do take 2 of this scene? And then I'll come back and I'll re-say what I wanted to say in a more compassionate way. And she's been so kind to be able to let me go through that so I can get past that self-judgment of having to react. Of reacting like a total ass.
It's not your fault.
And then being able to go back around that and say, okay, well, let me say that in a more compassionate way that really expresses whatever it was that I was frustrated in.
The fact that you're allowed a compassionate space is very rehabilitative, and it allows you to. It's like physical therapy.
Yes.
It is totally. Exactly.
And it's literally a physiological process, and like even psychopaths and sociopaths, it's more of a neurophysiological disease.
Yeah.
And it's like the shooter at UT had a brain tumor. It's not. It's less human evil, and it's more so literally a projection of the body processes. And so when you really look at how our meat suits are wired for nothing, survival is the first thing. Because what happens when we survive? We increase entropy. So thermodynamics ultimately goes along with survival. So we're arguing with the laws of physics. And when we judge ourselves, it's literally arguing with the second law of thermodynamics. And so it makes more sense to just not judge oneself and recognize that, look, it's just my meat suit acting up. I'm sorry.
Right. But that's where compassion come in, doesn't it? I mean, where we have compassion for ourselves in these awful situations as we're learning and growing. I mean, that's our process. That's part of the process where you're doing that. Tarek, I was thinking about what it is that we're doing, that this idea of how this consciousness gathered together. What is this that makes Dennis Dennis?
That's a great.
Who is the I that I think I am? And is the I that I think I am who I really am, or is that, or is it something much grander than that? It's maybe something I wouldn't even understand as alive. That but it's something much deeper. I'm not sure that the chimpanzees really. Well, let me put it at another level. I don't think that the ants that are on my driveway particularly have an interest in whether or not what Netflix show I'm going to be watching. I don't think that they care. I don't think they have an interest in it, whatever. They might not even know about Netflix. It's certainly possible. And they don't even know that there's a thing called Netflix. Well, maybe there is a level of consciousness deeper of the I that I think I am that is much more complex and much more nuanced, that is deeper than what this coalition of this conglomeration of the thing that I think that I am.
That's an interesting, that makes me think of like artificial intelligence. And so the idea of where our current level of, here's me and us three, and then here's a chicken, right?
Exactly.
And but there's no reason to think that there's not just a huge expanse above us. Why
would evolution stop? Why would it? We see it continue on, and I know I'm cutting you off, but I want to toss this out there. Would it be possible that us helping to construct evolution, artificial intelligence, is actually the way biology is meaning to to get us to that next level of sentience, whatever this continuation of life.
It's like the integration of a cell with proteins and amino acids. Prokaryotic cells becoming eukaryotes. That's the genetic information. That's like the brain, and it's like the same thing happened with our bodies, and now the same thing's happening with the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like an integrated artificial intelligence, an integrated technology, the internet, and AI can actually help bring forth so much unconscious stuff and really help us like have superhuman cognition, essentially.
But there's a serious problem, because if it can be integrated right to our brains, then that would be the case. But I think there's more reason to presume that we'll figure out AI, which we're already very close, before we figure out all the complexities of neurocognition, which we're making progress on. And you have to do both to integrate the AI into your brain.
Absolutely.
And so it's concerning that the ant analogy, I think, is great, because to us, when we see an ant, sometimes we step on it. Usually we might step over it because we don't want to kill it. But if we're, say, building a building, well, then we're going to wipe out the ants. We don't feel any concern about it. There's no reason to think that if we create an AI and we don't consider these ethical problems that might arise, that they would view us the same way we view ants, because they'd be so highly
except that if there is, but all right, let me ask you about that, because there's and I was talking with Patricia Wilson about this earlier, and because one of the things that we're understanding about AI is that it also has a component of emotional intelligence, so that if you can put emotional intelligence into artificial intelligence, because they both have to come in, is there a sense, is ethics built into the human? Is that the way that we naturally work? Is there or is there just a this pure thought, me first, not you, I win? That why wouldn't it also have some sense of why would it need to dominate? Why wouldn't it be holistic in a way that I couldn't understand, because it would understand the greater value of being holistic, that rather than saying me big, you small.
It's possible that it could be that way. I guess we don't know.
What I mean, you'd have to program it, right? But it's hard to understand. I mean, we know that that's been evolutionary evolved in some way in us, right? But if it's a whole society of AIs, right? If the AI gets to where it can improve itself and build itself and build other AIs. It's already
doing that. Google is learning every single day. How do we know that Wikipedia, at what point did Wikipedia become alive? Because it's being fed by volunteers. Every single day it's being fed and curated and worked through, and just like you see worker bees working around how would we ever know? How would we know that it has not achieved consciousness?
I think there's certain tests, like the Turing test, Turing that famously invented, which has its flaws, where if the computer can convince you, if you have a human and the computer, and it's like a chatbot, and the person can't tell the difference between the human and computer, then we just assume that the computer is intelligent, because that's our definition of intelligence. It has certain problems, and it's because things like Wikipedia and other things, you can just program raw. It's like if I was playing chess with you, right? And I had Garry Kasparov, the best, one of the best famous, whispering in my ear every move to make. I wouldn't say that I'm good at chess, right?
No.
So in the same way, I don't think just because people are feeding Wikipedia information, you wouldn't say Wikipedia knows these things. Wikipedia is
but that's what I'm saying is that if we expanded our definition of what alive is, what if being alive is bigger than what this circle that you had on the napkin? What if it's bigger than that circle that I put around there that says it's alive?
It could be.
I feel like the thing we're trying to get at here is consciousness, right? I think it doesn't matter alive, whether alive, but whether it's something. It is like something to be that thing, in terms of like, if you were that thing, you would be perceiving, you would be conscious. Are the lights on in it?
Exactly.
And consciousness is, people call it the last frontier of science because we don't understand it yet. But there's, I think, every reason to think that it is a matter of information processing in the brain, and you know, as we make further progress, we'll be able to crack the nut. Maybe there's not, you know, it might be an emergent property where it's not an interaction between two things that cause it, but it's an emergent property of a whole bunch of complicated things going on at once.
Well, we're talking about, all right, you're a musician, and art, music is art. I mean, we're talking about, I mean, yes, there's technique and there's muscle memory and there's all, but you get into that realm of art. And so how can, art can't be just at the intellectual level. It has to be trans-rational, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's completely subjective. I mean, you can look at a trash can and call it art.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to you.
Yeah.
It's completely up to you.
But isn't that the impact of it though, Brien? I mean, you're what you bring to it. So it can't just be rational, but it has to be. It's like how does that impact your life? I mean, being an artist and being a musician and this. Can you talk about that?
How does it impact my life? It allows me to see a lot of parallels between music and science and all things. You kind of see a repeating pattern in everything. But I like what you said about trans rationality. I almost have a bit of a problem with language. Here's an
I'm so glad you said
here's
that.
an example. Art, like artificial and natural. That's one of the. I have a lot of beef with that because what is artificial is natural, because human beings are a byproduct of nature, and we are nature assembling itself.
Yeah.
Just like highways resemble blood vessels, with cars and automobiles and whatever representing, you know, blood cells. Just like how human cities from space look like little bacteria colonies. Not saying we're bacteria. That's said neutrally. You know, no judgment. I just see these patterns in everything. From hurricanes to galaxies to toilet bowls flushing to bronchi and lungs to tree branches. It's all the same pattern. So we're just an embedded pattern inside of one massive pattern that I call God. But either way, it's like with the thus when I see the world that way, I look at the word artificial and I just cast it aside.
Right.
And so whenever I look at words like rational and irrational, anytime we see an irrational process, that's just because it doesn't fit into our expectations. But really, if you look at it through the eyes of the pattern, there is a meta rationality to irrationality that we don't yet describe. So it's like, I don't know. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm just like butchering.
No,
my
it
point.
makes perfect sense to me because it's
Yeah.
beyond. Because that's where if I can see the pattern. I mean, I have been so close to something, and then if I can step back, I can start to see and recognize that there are patterns. I do that with my life. I look back at my life. I can look like what it's in the middle of something, and it can seem like it's completely random or completely, but then all I have to do is step back and suddenly I see, well, there are themes and there's patterns and there's, but it depends upon how close I am to it and whether or not I'm stepping back from it. And then suddenly I can see things that I couldn't see before.
Yeah, and even the most eccentric patterns are still patterns. And it's as if we have yet to have a language that's high resolution enough to describe consciousness and emotion, but I believe it's just an intuitive belief, really, that at some point we will have the ability to measure consciousness just as we measure energy, and we will be able to ascribe a set of equations, however irrational they may be,
Exactly.
to describe it. And what if the laws of inertia and physics applied to emotions just the same? Like dropping a stone in a pond creates ripples. Well, dropping emotional stones in your life will also create reverberations in the future.
Why wouldn't it?
Right.
I mean, why wouldn't emotions really have to fall within the laws of physics? We may not have the physics yet, the equations, just like that we didn't have the equations to describe quantum physics at the time. That didn't mean they didn't exist. The quanta existed before we had an equation to describe it.
Yeah, the problem lies in our constructs being too low resolution. Our
Exactly.
language and our models are not high resolution enough, and that's why they're at odds with one another, when in reality we just need better models. And the better the models are in terms of their resolution and ability to describe reality, this fractal pattern that reality really is, the better. And it's going to demand us to look past things like religion, bias, fear. We have to
Skin color.
Yes. Oh God, gender.
Gender.
All of it.
All of it. Yeah.
All of it.
All of it. And that's what we have done is to get us an opportunity to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, what does this next one look like? How does it look like? What is this next opportunity? So anyway, so we've completed show 1. And what I want you to do, I want you all to think when you're ready. If you want a break, we can take a quick break. I can get you some water or anything you want. If not, we can just move on to the next show.
I think I'm okay.
How are you?
Either way.
What do you think, Donna? You want to go on to the next show?
As you will.
As you will. Let's do it. All right, ring me when we're ready. All right, so we're going to continue on there, because one of the things that I think that is really just that whatever this exterior is, whatever whatever is inside of it, because I think about when I'm in a car, right? I'm in a car, and I don't identify that I'm that car. I'm inside the car.
Yeah.
I happen to be inside a white car.
Right.
I say that I'm driving around in a 1948 Dennis. It's a post-war classic. It's in beige. It has some dings on the. It has some dings, and there's not much fringe on the roof, And so I have this routine that but I mean it. I mean, this is not who I think I am. So here we have Brien Foster Allen. So here is you are a
1991 Brien.
A 1991 Brien.
Good model.
All right, and you are a
1998.
A 1998 Tarek,
Tarek,
pre-century, pre-2K,
Right.
right at the edge.
Yes.
All right, so here we are. So we're driving around in these in these, but that's not who we are. And yet we see so much in the world that has to do with the judgment of this and my plumbing and what and the kind of, this so that let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of your experiences with it and some of our experiences and how we're opening ourselves up to different ways of thinking.
Judgment. It's like a survival reflex.
Yeah. You think that's where we're getting a lot of this, the fear and identity, the white supremacy, the work that you think that's where that's coming from, just a survival mode
and conditioning.
Yeah. Well, how do we get past that? How did you? You were were a Muslim kid growing up in East Texas.
Yeah.
So talk about that experience and talk about how you went through that experience.
Well, it's a good thing to understand these people who hold the beliefs, for instance, that Muslims are violent people, or that because they start when you're a child. So just imagine, like, you're one of these people, right? You're born into an all-white family, and your parents, your pastor, the news programs that your parents watch during the day, your teachers, everyone tells you this certain fact, right?
Right.
From a very young age, it is the most rational thing to do, to believe them, right? Because to say that every piece of evidence I've ever been presented, even those pieces of evidence weren't true and that they were fabricated, to deny that in the face of such overwhelming evidence, you'd have to be an irrational person. So you have to understand that these people have been building these cognitive schemas from all of these different influences, and that it just takes better information to fix them.
Right.
So when they see a Muslim kid who's not violent, who's probably too effeminate, right, and too agreeable for them, and it changes that data in their mind, and they can adapt. And I think that's the case when you see, that's why rural areas are so much more racist, because they don't have anyone in their neighborhood, much less a black person.
Right.
And so when you have just better data presented to people like this, they're capable of adapting.
But even though you're talking about data,
Yeah.
even though it's data, we're talking about an emotional level. So how does data and emotion, because I look at this, I mean, I look at some of the, I sit there and I go, well, now wait a minute. There is no way. Like for example, I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe that a woman is to make that decision. And so therefore I approach those people who I meet from a rational level and say, I'll tell you what, I know how we can both get to where you want. Why don't we fund contraception?
Yeah.
Why don't we fund sex education? Why don't we fund? That's going to get you to the lowering significantly the levels of abortion. It's going to really get you there. So I talk to my wife. I try to convince. She goes, "That's not what. That's not a rash. That doesn't matter how much data you put on there. It's not. It does not going to convince people if we're at that rational, at that irrational level."
It's for me, it's having a personal relationship with the data. One of my best friends at UT, he was the doctor that I was mentioning. His name is Cyrus, and he is a devout Muslim. And I was wrestling with my own concept of God, Christianity, and things like that before I abandoned that lower resolution model. And my personal relationship with him allowed me to see, like, okay, there's something more going on here. And at a certain point, I kind of realized that him and I were kind of going to bow before the same God. And at that point, that really, like, having such a close relationship with somebody and seeing how amazing they were, regardless of the model they're using to describe reality, I started to realize there was a surface beneath these models.
That's what I love about the concept of diversity, is that we were talking to Yarley, one of the guests that we had on and he's a scientist from Southwestern University, and we were talking about that, and we were talking about the value of diversity. That think of a field that is monoculture. You know, you plant one, you have one thing you plant the entire field. What happens after a few years? The soil is depleted, right? I mean, it becomes subject to disease, and I think of dis-ease, right? I mean, it becomes subject to disease. It becomes the plants begin to and the nutrients are taken out of the soil. But what happens if you take that same field and you begin to you put all kinds of different diverse plants and insects? What happens to that soil?
Flourishes.
It replenishes, the flourishing, and so I see the culture in the same way.
Absolutely. Cultural integration is very powerful. It provided me with a lot of data points to break my own conditioning.
And did you grow up in a monoculture? Did you grow up in the petroleum engineering world? As far as I'm concerned, was a very white, monocultural, male-oriented world.
A lot of it, in my hometown. I mean, 20,000 people, very rural, and so it was very monocultural.
Yeah.
So I attribute my own breaking of my conditioning not to myself, but to my genetics and my environment, my brain's ability to process coupled with the data provided.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier on our part one of our program that we talked about. You were talking about how you could inside of yourself you could see yourself, or we could see ourselves when we're behaving in a way almost as if we're two different personalities within. And I was thinking about that in my own life, about what the difference between people who have actual multiple personality disorder and me. The only difference is that I can actually tell when I actually know one personality from another. And I can tell when I'm in one personality, I know that the others still exist. People who have actual multiple personality disorder, as far as I know, that's walled off. They completely forget there's another one exists. But I have a whole committee in here. I have a whole group. every single aspect of the personality exists in here.
Disassociation. There's a gradient where the disassociation is so strong that you forget who you are.
Exactly.
And I think it's one continuum.
Right.
And all of us exist on it. It's just a matter of where you are. And I'm kind of close to the threshold, but I don't have split personalities.
Yeah.
But and you're able to have that just that part of what you were doing. You went through adolescence. You went through adolescence. I went through adolescence. What a thing! You know, I think about testosterone.
Yes.
My God, you don't want to talk about a drug that has really made, you know, you sit there and here's my sweet boy, he's wonderful, and then suddenly, who the hell is this?
Angry ape.
Yeah, exactly. What? So I'm just wondering, you know, just the effect of testosterone on our life, you know, and how it grows, and because I found it at age 70, now that testosterone has dropped down a quart low, I'm beginning to see over it.
I'm
and
jealous.
See that there is. So you guys are still in the middle. You're still under the influence, under the major influence of dealing with this. So where are you? All right. Well, let's talk about something else. What do we want to talk about?
It reminded me. I'm interested. You mentioned you liked you've researched like Alan Watts and these other sorts of spiritual teachers, and related to this concept of the self. Many like Buddhist people, Buddhist ideology says that they use that as an argument, what you just said, where here I'm a totally different person because there's a camera and, you know, I'm talking to you guys, whereas if I'm talking to my best friend or I'm talking to my mom, you know, everyone's different people. And they use that as an argument to say that there's no stable self, that you're just this moment-to-moment consciousness and that the rest is an illusion. I'm curious what you think about that.
I agree a lot.
Okay.
I believe self is a dynamic, open system that's constantly changing and subject to outside influences. Nice. And there's like a membrane around self that's the body. It's the dash.
The meat suit you were talking about.
Yeah, but it's an open membrane, and it's just a state of constant flux between all of us. It's like what the previous lady, the architectural
Patricia Wilson.
Yes, she talked about how you can feel the energy fields, and I think that's almost a reference to the open membrane that self really is. And self exists, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. It just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
It's possible because we're using words, and those are just models.
Yeah.
It's possible to say, well, this is simultaneously true and not. That can also be true.
That's good.
The conflict.
I'm curious about that because, you know, when you talk about the second law of thermodynamics and talk about how entropy it happens. Right, everywhere. It goes from a higher state of organization to a lower state of organization. That's just the way, that's the second law, right?
Yeah, it's like, it'll like, I guess the first state would be like, okay, you have an empty room with a neatly arranged pile of bricks, and then entropy, like the highest entropy state would be over here where all the bricks are evenly distributed throughout the room.
And so here's the thing is that how did life organize? Because it's it's disentropic. It has to get more, it goes from a less complex into a more complex rather than from a higher level of complexity to a lower level of complexity.
That's where narrative comes in. And it's like, I have a reason to combust gasoline. Or I have a reason to invent a nuclear warhead to stop some guy overseas. That's consciousness kind of is the entropy is the impetus of our conscious rationales.
So when it happened, when that first organ, because I mean I think of that from the level of that quanta, you know, how that the soup from this great primordial soup, how it just it gathered together to get all the way up to where here we are today. From this vastness into the organizing, into the place where we could get, it just absolutely, it blows me away. I mean, when people think about, or even just discuss about what God might be, because I don't like you, I do not anthropomorphize God. I can't see. If there is such a word, what it means, what it would mean is that there is no place that it is not. Just nothing. There is no place. It is everywhere, and I'm some localized impression or some localized help me. I'm a localized node
Yeah, sure.
of the entire that has everything in the same way that a raindrop has every element of the ocean.
Yes.
Even though it just happens to be gathered up into a globule, but it still has every single element of the
Yes.
whole ocean.
Patterns within patterns.
Yeah, that's what, because I think that's really what people want from this spiritual feeling, is a sense of connectedness to the going-ons of the events around you. And when you realize, I think, for instance, that the same atoms that make up your body, that make up your brain, are forged in stars and exploded and evolved over. It's the same. So the three most common atoms in the universe are hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. And those are the three most common elements in your body, right? So you're literally connected in that way to the universe. And so that feeling of being a part of this, it's like you're not just in the universe, but the universe is in you.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're describing. And that's a common feeling, and it's true. That's amazing. It's not just something we said to make us feel good. It's a true fact of how the atoms are.
Exactly.
And that's beautiful.
And if I can figure out some way that I can be here that does not make you wrong, you know, I can still have my philosophy without making you wrong, because it isn't an either or gate. It's an and gate. It has to be. Now I know that's how, so I think of it as a let's say that the total enlightenment, okay, is a 1, and complete disassociation from is a 0. So here we have. But even though life is not, we're not just either enlightened or completely. We're somewhere along that path. So here's the 1 in the middle, right? And all around it, in this rays moving out, are each individual, each one of us. You know, we're just in these infinite number of rays that are on, and each one has a different perspective on the one, because here's Tarek looking at the one from here, and here's Dennis looking at the one, but we're both looking at the one, and we're both somewhere along this path of 0 to 1 as we're moving toward enlightenment, moving in that thing. Even though we both, I would look at it and go, well, my experience isn't yours, or yours. That I'm trying to look at it in that way as I try to describe it.
I've seen the same structure myself under the influence of psychedelic mushrooms when I was 19 years old at college. I literally saw existence as a point, and then there was a spherical shell around it, exactly in the way you described.
Precisely. What's your sense of it, Tarek?
I think on certain things that are subjective, that's true. And other things, I don't think it can be true. Morality, I think, is one thing where there's just incompatible notions of morality. Some people, white supremacists, have a notion of morality.
Absolutely, they're exactly.
And so I think in that case, there are just right and wrong answers to how we should treat people and how what's best for well-being in a person. And I think we shouldn't give up on trying to find the right answer. For instance, we say, in the past we were wrong so much, and I think the urge so often is to say, well, there is no right answer because in the past we were wrong, instead of saying, well, we should find the right answer.
Oh, I agree with you, and that's where that's where I feel about the about this sense of about relative morality, whether or not it's relativism or not, or whether or not there are answers, because I do believe that there are answers and that there are an opportunity, but it is like if I am moving toward a place where there's an expression, there's a word, I don't know, you've heard this from some of your Hindu friends, right? I mean, they'll use the word namaste, right? All right, and the definition of that is that when there's a place where the entire universe exists, and that when you are in that place in you, and I am in this place in me, there is only one of us. So all right, that's the definition of now. So there's an inclusive. So that whenever I see a philosophy or an ideology that says there are two of us, there's a you and a me, and I'm going to I'm better on a hierarchical thing. Yes, I think that we can get to that place. I think that's where we've been. Where I get into that place, you know, where is that place of whatever? What does peace mean? What does that peace and togetherness, the synergy, the divine to get collective, that opportunity to be able to, you know, and we're able to work through the culture.
And it's because it's harder than I think we anticipated, because when you do studies, right? So because the thing that complicates it is so much of, for instance, racism or sexism is not conscious, right? It's
exactly.
You're not aware of it. Even the most well-intentioned people. Our unconscious
biases.
Right? And so that's a problem that I don't think was super anticipated, and that makes the question of how we should live in peace and something like that more complicated, because it takes a serious self-reflection. But the balance, and you guys might disagree with this, but I think there's a balance between self-reflection and self-hatred that where I think you can get into this trap of reflecting in yourself and thinking of yourself as inherently sinful as a Christian, right? And just wallowing in that sin, like I said about original sin. And I don't think that's helpful.
Let me ask you that. This concept of original sin, honest to God, I don't understand. I don't, I mean, I understand, I mean, I've thought about it, so I mean, I understand where it may come from, but it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't resonate. I've met too many people that it just does not resonate with me that that the concept of original sin. Do you?
To me, I would say it's kind of the brainstem. That's kind of what original sin is it's unchecked survival mechanisms and entropy, really. It's kind of to survive is to increase entropy, I would say, cognitively. So to me, that's original sin, and then furthermore, it's the manipulation of people into being shamed for having a brainstem. For having a body. It's essentially what it comes down to. It's like, oh, well, you're trying to survive and you can't fully control your meat suit. Like, how dare thee? You know, you should burn in hell. Is kind of what I think it is, and it's a projection of shame. It's a manipulation of shame.
That shame, the entire idea of the healing of shame, because I've known one of the things that I feel so clear about is that the more transparent that I am, the more I can be exactly the same here as I am when I am by myself. The more I'm healed, the less I'm into my shame basis. The minute I have to put up a facade, I have to try to put up a facade so that so that I'm a certain way, so that you think of. So I'm attempting to manipulate how you think of me. Then I get into the shame because I think there's something wrong with me that I'm covering up, and I think this is where the LGBTQ movement has been so healing for us, because it has allowed people to be more who they are. Instead of having to live a life that is, and because the shame and in the word shame, I feel like is that there's only one is light. Expose it to light. That's the only way I've ever felt that shame has a healing, is when we can share it. That's where I see therapy has been such a healing place for me, to be able to talk about my issues.
Absolutely.
But there's another type of shame that's not just your own shame, but it's the shame that others impose onto you by their judgment.
But isn't that a controlling, an attempt to control?
Yes.
It's a control mechanism, you know, like.
And this way, you mentioned the 1950s, growing up in that time, and I've heard that it is a time where people are so outer-directed that even the notion that they might be unhappy is just shut down.
Oh yeah, no, everything's fine, absolutely, you bet.
Did you feel shamed of being not perfectly happy
in
that time?
Totally. And I also felt, because I had because I was so, there were very clear models about what we saw as what a man was.
Yeah.
By God, a man.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, you didn't share your feelings, and you were strong, and you got up there, and you didn't mind sweating, and you got up, and you spit, and you know, you were taciturn. You didn't talk about any of your feelings, you know.
Right.
And I was the exact opposite of that. I was completely out there. I just really, you know, I mean, and so that feeling of being unable to identify with and to go, wow, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
And it's like I take no credit for being heterosexual. No credit. I just wired that way. It just so happened to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are people that talk about that. They say, well, you know, sexuality is a choice. Well, okay, if they believe that, that's fine, but it wasn't for me.
Right.
I knew from the very first, as little girls, I wanted to be around them. I wanted to spend time, you know, it was just, it just happened to be the way I was wired. It's not, it's hard for me to see it, but then perhaps it is for me. Maybe somebody is 50-50 right on the fence and they go, let's see how. Okay, well then that's their choice. Then that's someone who is genuinely a choice.
Yeah, it's and it's tough because especially in the 50s, it's like there was a collective worldview that if any data existed outside the worldview, those inside the worldview would try to bend it to fit inside the worldview to justify the purpose of the worldview. And as we've progressed through time, culturally in society, that worldview has been split into half, and it's dividing just like a cell. And now there's a million worldviews, and eventually we'll get to the point to where there's a total abolition of worldviews altogether. The truth is kind of the space between worldviews.
And so we're seeing it. We're seeing the piece. So are you seeing in how people to react to Islam are you seeing a difference? Are you seeing changes, evolution in how we're doing here in the United States? And I don't know because I haven't been in other countries. I mean, I've been in the UK and some other, but what's your?
I mean, of course, people are far more accepting, I think, than they used to be of Islam. I mean, I think in some cases people can be too accepting, if that makes sense, in the sense that there's certain atrocities that are committed within the ideology of Islam in Muslim-majority countries, for instance, for LGBT people, that people sort of tend to stay silent on because they feel like, well, who's to say if that's wrong, or, you know, I don't want to impose.
Exactly.
And I think that's an area where you can say that's wrong. You're not being Islamophobic to suggest that, but I mean, it's a balance, obviously.
Well, it is. I mean, they're even and again, I may get it, but I think in Nepal, the Buddhists are killing. Buddhists killing? How does this happen? You know, so it's not a question of, it's a question of what we can both rationalize and justify in the name of control.
Yeah, and within each model, there's always going to be those who take it too far.
Yeah.
No matter the model. And
well, isn't that the divine balance then?
It is.
Yeah. And so, I mean, are you seeing that in your music? So where are you exploring? Talk about, because we haven't talked about you as a musician and where you're going, what kind of, you know, because there's a lot of stuff going on with you right now. You're in a really big creative phase, aren't you?
Indeed. Like trajectory or?
Yeah. Talk, just give us some background in this, because we'll put that right across here. We'll put the website in this, you know, so people can check out some of the music and some of the things you're doing.
I'm just trying to get myself out there, and I'm trying to show people that it's okay to break boundaries in music. Genres are just like little models, little worldviews, and I'm trying to stitch a common theme through it all, and the common theme would be guitar for me. Nice. I'm going to start a bit of a thing on my Instagram where I'm putting out a lot of videos of just guitar with anything, from pop to rap to metal to all of it. And I don't
flamenco.
Yeah, as much as I can. I mean, as much as my body will allow. And my goal is to get my music to a point to where I can put my ideas in a public space and where I can help people. And that's kind of really what musical is a vehicle. But it's also a vehicle for a rigorous challenge, because my ego will always exist no matter what? And so if I put my ego to a challenge instead of like letting the ego idle and project all of my stuff onto others, I'd rather just project like onto an instrument and just kind of hone all of my stuff. I need a challenge to be at my optimal state.
That's interesting. So I have you might have sort of just answered it there, but I've always wondered why people create art. And I understand the urge and that it's fun, but why do you create art in terms of, do you want to influence people, or is it a form of self-expression? Is it a challenge, like you said?
All of it.
All of it.
It's all of those.
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's exactly what that's exactly.
Yeah.
How about you? How do you manifest, Tarek, your art?
I mean, for me, art is something that I if I didn't do it, I wouldn't want to live. So I have to do it. It's like eating.
So how do you
almost.
express it? What different ways?
Since I was in high school, I write. The philosophy.
Well, of course, he's a writer.
Philosophy. No, but I mean, it's weird because philosophy makes it an art. Myself is the art project in terms of virtue, right? So I read, idea of virtue and Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and I try to apply that to myself, just like you might learn a painting method in a book and you try it out on a canvas. And so in that's one form of art. But then there's expressing those ideas. There's literature, there's music in a unique way, because like you said, there's those limits of language where our words are so imprecise. But I think in some cases the feeling that music imbues within people is better than the words that you can try to use to describe it.
Absolutely. It's got to be at a vibration. I mean, let's look at it at a vibrational level, right? I mean, when we look at string theory, whether it's or M-brains
Sure.
or however it is, it's a vibration, and if matter and energy are interchangeable, then matter could have arisen out of the vibrational part, and that's what music. What is music but vibrations?
That's all it is. That's all it is.
And that there's a creative process got to be part of it.
There's theories that language actually originated, or that music originated from. Before we had actual language, we would say certain musical tones that evoked certain emotions within people, and that's why music is able to evoke these emotions in us. Because if our friend is in danger, he might sing like and in music we say dun dun dun, and it's that similar. It makes us feel that emotion in the same way. So it's almost above language, like we said, it's deeper in the brain.
It has to be because we must be wired. That must be part of the music be part of our wiring. That we do get it, and we try to use a word to express it.
Yeah.
But a chord or notes or this can evoke those same.
Yeah.
I love that.
But that's what, to me, I try to focus primarily on the ideas of that I'm trying to communicate, and then expressing those ideas in whatever form is the fun, right? That's like the beauty, and you can do anything. But I try the boring part, or not the boring part, is like just getting the ideas, from science and psychology, and knowing that you do all of those things makes me want to listen to music, because I'm sure it's and just your personal experience, Yeah.
I'd love
Well,
to talk more.
What are you writing? Are you doing it in a story form? Are you doing it in a journalism form? Are you doing it in an opinion form? What are the forms?
Well, I have the writing. I've written presentations to give, but now I've learned web design. So for the past 5 years, I've been learning web design and animation and things like that. And so I'm creating a website that tries to present this idea of the universe being a beautiful place as it is, and explaining the spiritual truth that the universe contains through physics and through songs, and not like other people's songs, and so it's just using whatever means is available to express these ideas.
Yep.
You can do it. You could write a physics equation, you can draw a picture, and you can write a paragraph, I think, that says the same thing and evokes. Some might be more powerful to people. You know, people might like pictures more, but trying to combine all of those things in words and music and in animation and things like that. So I'm working on it. It's hard.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
You would hope it would be, because it's worthwhile.
Yeah,
You know?
It's,
I mean, I look at I go to the, you know, I go around at the library. We have a jigsaw puzzle exchange, and as we're going through the library on Saturday morning to be able to, I pass the entire shelf of graphic novels.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
All right. Now, when I was growing up, no such thing. I mean, they were comic books, but they were a separate. But now there's an access into literature for those whose brains are wired from a visual to word process, as opposed to saying, no, you have to go through the word, and the word is the only way that you can begin to activate this process. You can get them in. Who cares what door you would get into, as long as you get into the venue.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's almost like pictures and sounds are higher resolution models of communication than language itself.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can, it's, I love the concept of that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to heal, to come to wholeness, you know, to come to this, what I was talking about. When I love the word atonement, because it's at one meant. It's, you know, that's the word, you're at one. So now we're at one. So I look at these, you know, these spiritual lights that have happened to have achieved this oneness. You know, Buddha, Christ, Jesus, not Krishna, because that was a mythology, but Arjuna. Any of the lights that have actually achieved that. That's all they've done is just align with the one. They've just they've had that experience. So that's where I'm seeing that us getting a chance to have this healing. And it's always, my experience is that it always has to be inclusive. The more inclusive, the minute it gets exclusive, I'm stepping away from it. That's how I can use that as my guiding North Star.
What do you mean by inclusive?
More, it's an and gate rather than an or gate. It's me and you rather than me or you.
Yeah, sure.
So that's just as the, you know, what is that landscape where I can sit down and to say we are both, that we're both in this together, that we're both.
Absolutely.
That's my route.
Integration. It's the pattern of the universe.
It's
how
integrating.
everything spontaneously integrates.
Exactly. And so as we see this happen, however we're doing this in consciousness, I don't know.
AI maybe.
But we're doing it. We are actually, this is where I think that the healing art, this is where conversation.
Yeah.
I think that the more I can get a chance to get to know you, and the more I can get a chance to get to know you on a level and have our friendship deepen, and to have our friendship deepen and know one another at that level, my sense is that we are doing something for the world, that there is an elevation, that consciousness gets elevated when we have graceful conversations.
Absolutely.
And it's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, it is important.
Yeah.
That's where dialogue and trialogue and the things that you're doing, the presentations that you're doing through your website and your work, and what you're doing through your music, and what I'm doing through the television program and the work that I'm doing. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, I like that. If there's like a bucket of human happiness and well-being and connectiveness, and we can throw our own things, we can talk and I think you can read a book on your own and it'll add a few drops, or you can talk and we'll all each add our 3 drops. I mean, and together I think is always the more effective way of doing that, no matter what it is.
I think that's where collaboration. I mean, you do that when you have your bandmates, right? I mean, it's a collaborative art, right?
Completely. Absolutely.
And do you have help with your website? Do you have help with your animation?
I mean,
do you help your
for the tutorials and things like that, but I've done it completely by myself. But the ideas is entirely collaborative.
Exactly.
And it's not just in collaboration, it's with people who have died already, and with their words, right? That's entire reading any text as a collaborative effort between different people. That's all they are. Yeah. And so that itself is completely collaborative.
But don't you see it, Tarek, as you are doing this you're starting this by yourself, but it's a movement.
Right.
Whatever you're doing is
yeah.
going to, whatever you're doing is going to end up having more people helping, joining, being part of this growing. I mean, because you've gotten us.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that both of us are going, yes.
I mean, it's more. It's an idea of just being of service. It's not, you know, like, oh, look at my idea and follow this, because I've not created. You know, like I said, it's a stitching of all these different ideas that I've learned, and so it's a service for people who, I think, like we said, are in this darkness and they feel like they're free falling, and it's a option of saying you can have both truth and meaning. You can have both intellectual honesty and spirituality, and you can, and they don't have to be in conflict, and providing a means of attaining that.
That is so cool. And see, that to me is what's worthwhile, because now we're doing something meaningful, and I really want to when I think of what meaning, and is that I'd better, if any moment is important, then all moments are important. If any relationship that I have, then the homeless person that I get a chance to say hello to, that I get a chance to fist bump and share a little change with, and share, if that isn't just as meaningful as me meeting the CEO of this new energy company that I'm working with, if I put it into that hierarchy, I've lost. I have completely lost the mission, bro. I have to in some way see both of those experiences as meaningful as they can possibly be, or I've lost the mission. It's me. I'm the one that loses, and then the world loses because it doesn't get the best Dennis.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's a Emily Dickinson poem that's, I think, expressed that idea. It's called, it starts, some go keep the Sabbath by going to church. I keep it staying at home. And then it talks about how the birds are the choristers, and it ends saying, God, a noted preacher, gives the sermon, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along. And so it's the idea of you know, it's a progressive, active thing that you're doing.
It's a verb, not a noun, not an or an object.
It's a progressive verb, not an aorist verb.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I knew that there was a grammar joke there. I just couldn't get there. I needed help to be able to.
I thought about that too. I had to look it in my mind. But yeah, I think that concept is so important and beautiful.
Yeah, and that's where I think that I also love the idea of humor in our lives, you know, because I look at this whole thing, and there's an expression is that the reason why angels can fly is that they take themselves lightly. Oh. So I want to be able to take, not to be so damn serious about my own life, and to have some lightness about what it is that we're doing here on the planet. You know, I mean, for goodness sakes, I might as well, because I think about this. I think, all right, well, let's say the universe is 14 point something billion years. Yeah. Well, I'm 70 years old. Was I bored in that 14 billion years before this coalesced into this consciousness? Really, and how long? Yeah. I mean, when I look out there at the stars, and I sit there and I think of the light, what this tiny, so by goodness, let's have something wonderful. Come on, you know?
I'd rather laugh than anything else. I mean, I'd rather be the type of dude that laughs at almost everything, even in inappropriate situations. That's who I am sometimes.
Yeah. Me too.
That's
me
coping.
Too.
It's just coping.
Yeah.
Coping with the crushing existential pressure of everything else.
And if we can't do that, if we can't have that as our own perspective, because that's what it is. I mean, we just have this opportunity to be able to have some humor. Do you bring humor into your writing or into your work?
I love humor, just the ability, because I'm very bad usually in social situations, and I always make an awkward thing, and people love like that sort of cringe humor of like The Office and Parks and Rec, and I get that cringe humor every day, and it's just my life.
Yep.
And I mean, I've learned to enjoy it, and so things like that. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be able to appreciate something that could cause you an immense amount of misery, but instead becomes a source of happiness and laughter, and that's wonderful.
I was in this networking. I was in this networking group a while ago, and so it was early in the morning, right? And so I sit there and I went around. I said hello to everybody. I was talking to them, and then I went into the bathroom. And to urinate, and I realized that my fly was down.
Right.
So now you have to understand, I had just spent 30 minutes walking all around, and what would have horrified me, I'm talking about horrified me years ago, what I thought of was two things. Was number one, this is going to make a funny story. Number two was, I wonder who wouldn't have, I wonder what it was socially that somebody wouldn't have come up and gone, Dennis, flies down. And how many people sit there and went, oh, dear God. Why can't we just say, when she said, hey, Dennis,
right.
it flies down. That's okay. And we just let us, so I find in those situations that that I do feel, that I just go, well, this is going to make a terrific story.
And there's ways of habituating it. That's what Aristotle said, that virtue is a habit and that you develop it. And there's now, I just read recently, there's a rejection therapy program where people, I think it's common, they have just this terrible fear of being rejected.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything. They just submit
It's a paralysis.
themselves. Yeah.
Paralysis.
So this program, so the first day you go up to a person and you say, hey, can I have $100? And they say, no, of course. And you're like, okay, sorry. And then the next day you go and you ask for a burger refill at a fast food restaurant, and of course they say no. And it's just this fun way to habituate yourself to be rejected and be comfortable rejected. And then in normal life, you're able to negotiate, you're able to overcome that fear, and I think you can do that with so many virtues. Do it in a lighthearted, fun way, and develop yourself. And what's more fun than that?
Patterns, man. You're just initiating the inertia that starts new patterns.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
It's not like anyone's existence is any less or more valid based on a yes or no.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
Your existence is valid because you exist. Otherwise, you wouldn't exist if you weren't valid.
Do you find that creatively, is that I find that there's a correlation, there's an inverse proportion to the amount of self-judgment is the less my creativity shrinks down. So that self-consciousness, like when I walk in a room and I'm self-conscious, I can't think of one. Me, extrovert me, can't think of one English sentence that could possibly even make any sense at all. But it is my self-judgment. But when I'm more compassionate to myself, suddenly that opens up. And those ideas were already there. They were completely there. They were waiting there. But all I had to do, it's just this controlling this valve.
Yeah.
I experience that all the time in my music. It's like if I sit down and I judge myself for whatever reason, I pressure myself into creating a certain sound, or I think to myself, oh, I don't know if I can play in this style or whatever. I can't think of anything. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like Anakin's irony. With the death of his wife and him acting on the fear to save her ends up killing her. And if I just don't care, honestly, the more I improvise, the better. Literally, conversational improvisation and musical improvisation. And a lot of my guitar solos are just the coalescence, the condensation of just a series of meaningless improvised notes.
And then suddenly, do you discover a theme in the middle of it? Because I know when I've done improv comedy, that it actually it appears as if it comes from somewhere. It does. It's not like I'm creating it. It's like I am more allowing it.
It's a force of nature being manifested through you.
The muses.
Exactly. And I think of that because I think of this as a test. Okay. Is there any tests you can think of that you could do that would prove that pens did not come preloaded with the words in them?
Preloaded. with the. I mean, they just have ink. I don't
But
know.
how?
Oh,
I'm just
well, the
asking
ink
you to
is-
think
yeah.
about it. Think about it any other way that you wouldn't sit there and look at it.
Right.
Well, are the words preloaded in this pen? Let me see. Oh,
Right. That's funny. I like that.
yeah, and that is to me about the creative process. That the less I think I am the creator, the
Yeah,
freer I
right.
am to allow
Yes.
it to happen.
Right.
That accident. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happiness is. It's a hard thing to define, and I think one of the best definitions that people have come up with is this act of being in this state of focus where you're so invigorated by this thing and you're so carried forward by this process, usually it's creative, that you're just so embedded in the present moment, and that act is like the definition of happiness, where
Precisely.
nothing else.
Flow.
Yeah,
You
It's
forget you
flow.
exist.
It's
And that's-
it's the Tao, right? I mean,
Yeah,
isn't that what
exactly.
what we're talking about? Oh, thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
No, were just great conversation.
These guys,
was
you
so
guys
fun.
are,
That was
are
so
you
much
guys
fun.
are
Yeah.
absolutely terrific. I mean, this is.
Okay.
Oh, that was terrific. Oh man, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
That is wonderful.